Hi, I'm Maggie. Thank you for stopping by Crafts the Charm today. You are most welcome here. In a couple of other videos, I think I've mentioned that I like to play a game called Design Home, and that's a room decorating game. In Design Home, there is wall decor and table decor and also floor decor. And those pieces are, I think, created by the artists at Design Home. Some of them are really cool. And I was remembering some of the cool coastal pieces the other day, and I realized I think that we could make those almost for free from stuff around the house and the yard. So I'm going to show you those pieces, and then we're going to see if we can make them. Let's go have some fun. Now here's an example of a Design Home room, and it has some coastal decor in it, those seahorses and the fish on the table. And here's an example of another room, and this one also has the fish table decor. Here are the seahorses up close, and you can see that they're basically made of sticks, mostly horizontal sticks. Now we're not going to make these anchors, but notice that one of them is made of rope. The others are made of sticks, horizontal and vertical. And here is the fish table decor. It looks like they are stuck into some driftwood, and they're decorated with patterns of what look like little shells. So obviously I need some wood, and this is a part of my yard that I have not cleaned up yet. And we had some trees come down last year, so we sort of sorted the wood. This is mostly sticks that we might use for kindling, and then, we have some larger pieces of wood. And there's some wood that's just come down back there that came down over the winter, so we haven't sorted it yet. There's also some boards in here. So I picked out some sticks, and there were also some boards that I really liked. What else will we be using? I did say free. Well, sticks and some cardboard. And I'm going to use cardboard as the backing, and I'm going to sketch out a seahorse here, and this is the larger seahorse. So I'll sketch it with pencil, and then I will go over that with a Sharpie so that I can see it. And I wanted to just look at what do different materials look like on this seahorse outline. Like, might we use some of this white nautical rope? I also have some brown nautical rope, and of course we have the sticks, and I'm wearing gloves because of the sticks. Now the trick with the sticks is, of course, we're going to have to cut them. So I thought I would try first with this little miter box that I have. And I actually found this quite difficult with the miter box. Maybe that saw is old. I'm not sure why. But what I ended up finding worked much better was my garden clippers. And they're really long, so I'm able to cut sticks that are difficult to cut with them because I have that leverage. So I used those, and I also had some garden clippers. So sometimes I would mark where I wanted to cut the stick with the clippers, and then you're probably not going to see me cut with the shears very much because I had them on the floor on a piece of cardboard so that I wouldn't make a big mess with them. So I would mark with the little clippers and then cut with the bigger clippers. For some pieces of wood, I was able to cut them with the little clippers, especially the smaller pieces. And also, one or two of these pieces of wood are actually dried vine, and that is quite easy to cut with the little clippers. I should probably talk a little bit about the choice to use cardboard and what I'm doing here. I had originally looked at the Dollar Tree to see if they had anything in a shape that I wanted to use for these wall hangings. But the chances of them having something in the right shape and the right size I thought were pretty slim, and it turned out they didn't have anything. And then I thought, well, why wouldn't I just use cardboard? Now, of course, the disadvantages to cardboard, one is that it's not very sturdy, even though this is corrugated cardboard. And the other is that you're not going to want to put this outside where it can get wet. So if you wanted to make an outdoor piece, this is probably not the best choice. Because it's not very sturdy, what I ended up doing was cutting
3 layers of cardboard. And so what I did was I had this original one with the drawing on it, and that gives me a basic outline. But I don't want to see that, so I want the sticks to extend beyond it. So what I did was I cut the next 2 layers smaller than this and put them on top and glued to them, but I could still see this outline below. And then once I had finished with those, then I cut this one smaller and glued it, and I glued them all together. Now when I'm gluing, I am using a combination of wood glue and hot glue. I use the wood glue for permanence, but the hot glue to hold things in place while I'm working on them. And this is a low temperature hot glue. So I recorded a lot of this just so that you could see the process, and I'll speed it up. But I just laid the sticks out and cut them, and of course the middle part's pretty easy, so I didn't record all of that, but I did want to show you doing the tail and doing the head and doing the little fins because they're a little bit different. So I'm going to speed this up and let you watch me glue sticks to this piece of cardboard. Now, this lovely item is my experimental item. So what I did after I finished the seahorse was I glued some sticks of various colors and types, and some with bark still on them and some without bark still on them, to this piece of cardboard. So I feel like my seahorse looks a little more rustic than coastal, if you can imagine a rustic seahorse. And that's partly because the wood is not all really sun bleached and gray, and partly because it's got a little bit of bark on it in some places. So I wanted to see if I could maybe alter that look, but I didn't want to work on my seahorse. It was quite a bit of work to put it together, so I'm practicing or experimenting on this little thing. And so what I'm doing here, and the reason I'm wearing a ratty old red sweatshirt instead of my usual ratty old black sweater, is because this is bleach. So this is straight bleach, or whatever comes in a Clorox bottle, that's straight. And I'm destroying this sponge and just rubbing it over this wood, and either I'm cleaning it or I'm bleaching it, not sure. But so it does lighten it up, but I didn't really like the color of it bleached. It looked a little more yellow than gray to me. So then I tried some gray paint. So I mixed some black and white acrylic paint, and it's just apple barrel acrylic paint. And I mixed water in with that to try to get a wash that would give me more of a coastal or seashore look to this. So once I was happy with that, with my experimental piece, then I did the same thing with the seahorse. I rubbed it with the bleach, and then I did the wash over it. okay, if we're going to be true to the design home decor piece, this guy needs a little baby seahorse to go along with him. And I've figured out roughly the proportions, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to sketch out a baby seahorse on this piece of cardboard, and then I'm going to start filling him in. Well, cut him out and fill him in. But for the baby seahorse, just to do something different, I thought I'd use the rope, and I used the brown rope for this one. And because the rope is, I guess, not as heavy, and maybe also because the baby seahorse is a little bit chubbier than the adult seahorse, I only needed one layer of cardboard. I think I did also forget to mention the hanger. So now is a good time. Hopefully you haven't been following along and making this because, well, you're going to have to figure out a hanger. What I did was, before I glued the sticks on the top of the seahorse, I poked a couple of holes or cut a couple of holes in the cardboard, and I used some of that 22 gauge florist's wire, and I just put it through the 2 holes, and it's on the back so that I have something that I can hang it from. And I tried to figure out the center of gravity. The middle of the head seemed to work just fine for hanging that. So I'm going to do the same thing with this little guy. I'm going to cut a couple of holes in the head and poke some of that wire through so that, you know, most of it's coming out the other side. And I did a little bit of hot glue over the holes before I put the rope on this little guy. This beautiful piece of wood from my wood pile was the closest thing I had to something that looked like driftwood, and I just love the shape of it. But it's covered with I don't know what, maybe lichen or who knows. So I decided to bleach this just because I don't want anything living on it. If something is living on it, I don't know. I'm going to sand it later. But I thought I'd start with some bleach just to kill anything that happens to be on it. But this is smaller than the piece that's in Design Home. That's quite large, maybe twice as big as this from what I can tell. But I just really loved the shape of this. And so then what are we going to do for the fish? I have these wood boards, which they might be from a pallet, I'm not sure, and then I have these older wood boards which may be from a deck, and they're really quite rotten. I love the look of those, but I think they're too rotten for me to cut fish out of, and I will probably want to use them in another project because they're just so cool looking. So I just have a piece of scrap paper here, and I'm going to sketch out a fish and then outline that with some Sharpie, and I will use that as a pattern. And I figured I can get about 5 fish out of one of these pieces of wood, and I think 5 should be enough. I would have preferred actually to cut out a few more just so I could try a few different things with the fish and figure out what look I liked for the fish, but I ended up just cutting out 5. One thing I did want to mention is that there are alternatives here. I think that you certainly could use cardboard for the fish if you wanted to, or I noticed at the Dollar Tree there were some really beautiful fish in the coastal section, and so it's probably not that hard to find a fish shape. I just wanted to use this wood. I really like wood, and I wanted to make this entire project from scratch and from things that I found as much as possible around my property. So out on the deck I have my saber saw here, and I don't have the best setup, but let me talk a little bit about what I do to be safe when I'm cutting with the saber saw. So I am wearing eye protection, I'm wearing a respirator, and of course gloves, but that's just because I'm working with wood. And I'm working on this metal table, which isn't the best option, and I only had one clamp. But I have clamped that very tightly to the table. I never saw in the direction of a part of my body. I don't hold things with my arm and saw toward my arm. And I'm going very slowly and letting the saw do the work, so never push the saw. And I was very successful in cutting out 5 of these fish, just taking it very slowly and adjusting the clamp and the wood and the saw as needed as I went along. So once those are all cut out, I'm going to sand it down, and I've got my mouse sander here with a 60 grit sandpaper. And I started with an old piece of sandpaper because I was a little worried about my old piece of what I'm going to call driftwood from now on. I didn't know how sturdy it was, so I started out with this older piece of sandpaper, and then I ended up using a newer piece after I found out that that piece of wood really could handle quite a bit of sanding. So I sanded down all the edges of the fish and the sides. I was torn about sanding the tops of them because I thought they looked really cool with the edges sort of light and the tops and bottom weathered. Of course, I did want to sand that Sharpie off. But so that was it. I just sanded them all and sanded as much of the bark off of that piece of wood as I could, and then I used the piece of sandpaper that I had cast aside once I switched sandpaper to sand the inside of the piece of wood by hand as much as I could. You can see there's some bits of sponge left in there, but I got it pretty well cleaned out and cleaned off. So I thought I had recorded showing you I was going to try spraying this with 2 different sealants. But this is what the result looked like. So I sprayed it with Flex Seal, which is intended to waterproof things, and I also sprayed it with a Rust-Oleum just clear lacquer. And neither one left any sort of weird discoloration or feeling. They both seem to work pretty fine, so I would think if you did want to make this an outdoor piece of decor, you might be able to cover it with Flex Seal. I would cover front and back. Now, I have these garden stakes, which are from the Dollar Tree, so I think you could use the garden stakes to attach the fish to the piece of driftwood, or what I plan to use is hangers. But if you don't want to use hangers or garden stakes, you could also use skewers, bamboo skewers. That would work just fine. What I'm going to do is drill holes in these little fish, and I'm going to drill holes in the driftwood. And I'm using these kettlebells because I don't have a nice table clamp to hold them. So I'm just using these kettlebells to hold them still while I drill holes in them. So I drill holes in their center, and I then drill holes in the piece of driftwood, and I just tried to figure out how I wanted to position them. It's tricky because we have 3 dimensions here. We've got sort of a front to back, and we've got a top to bottom, so there's different ways that they're going to look. I waited to drill the holes in the driftwood until after I had put something on the surface of the fish, which is really the fun part of this project. Not that the rest of it wasn't fun, but I can't say I love sanding. So painting the fish or adhering something to the fish, I think that's the really fun part of this project. Let's get to that. Okay, but before we have fun, we have to figure out how to cut these hangers, and all I could find was these giant bolt cutters, and these actually work just fine. So I did use these giant bolt cutters to cut the hangers. Hopefully you have something at home that isn't quite so ridiculous for cutting yours, or you could use the bamboo skewers, which are very, very easy to cut. Now, finally, we're at the really fun part, which is doing something to the surface of the fish. And, well, if you know me, you know I love wood, and I just think they look great the way they are, but they are a little plain. What I'm going to say is if you decide to do only one side, make sure your fish are pointing the way that you want for the side that you're doing. So you may want them all pointing in the same direction like they're swimming in a school, which is what I wanted to do. So I have some cool stuff here. This is this beautiful Craft Smart paint, which is from Michaels, and this is apple barrel white paint, baking soda, because you can get a nice texture if you mix that with paint. And then I have those little pebbly rocks, which I got at the Dollar Tree, and I'll confess I wanted to buy these little glass tiles from the Dollar Tree, but I don't end up using them. I love them, they're really cool, but I felt like they were just a little too inorganic for my fish. You will see I do put them on the fish. So I put a number of things on the fish, and you don't have to go this direction at all. There's just so many options here. Like you could cover the fish with some twine, sort of the way I did with the little seahorse, or you could paint them a very bold color, like if you like those sort of yacht club flag colors or boat colors. You could make them look like they came from some found wood. So like if they look like they came from a crate with bits of spray painted numbers on them, something like that. You can paint them. You can stick paper to them, you know, like scrapbooking paper or cloth. So you can see what I did. I ended up gluing those little, I only used the blue ones, pebbly rocks. And I also used the baking soda to make a very textury paint with the white. And then I cut a piece of sponge to be sort of fish scale shaped and used it to make a fish scale sort of texture. The final thing I did was I was going to glue down more of those pebbly rocks with the hot glue, and when I put the hot glue down, I just loved the way the hot glue looked by itself. Looked sort of like water, sort of bubbly. So one of the fish I did with just hot glue. So I did then figure out the placement and drill the holes in the driftwood, which was a little bit tricky, particularly on the inside parts there. And it's looking a little wonkers right now, but I've basically figured out the height and the placement back to front of each of these. And now what I'm going to do is just hot glue them into place, which I say just, but again, it's a little bit tricky, particularly for the parts that are inside the piece of driftwood, but just a little hot glue to basically fill in the hole and keep it from wobbling too much. This isn't a toy, it's just supposed to sit on a table, so it does, I don't think it needs to be super sturdy, hopefully not. If so, I don't think hot glue's gonna do it. Maybe, I don't know, maybe some sort of epoxy or something. But I do just fit each of the metal pieces in, make sure they're a good height before I do that. And then the same with the fish, just put a little bit of hot glue inside the hole on the fish and then fit each fish over the metal piece, and that's it. And here are my decorative pieces with my usual sort of inadequate staging. Hopefully they look better in your home. I would have loved to have put this on like a white wooden coastal table. That would look perfect, but this is what I have.
What did you think of our inexpensive design home inspired decor? My seahorses are still on the wall over there, but I brought the table decor over here, my little piece of driftwood, and I do like it. I think that was fun to make, and it's a nice decor piece to have. If you made any of these pieces, please tell me about it in the comments below, or if you made variations. When we're using cardboard, we can make any shape we want. I would love to hear about it. I would love you to send me your pictures. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. And if you like this sort of content, please consider subscribing to Crafts the Charm. Thank you for spending time with me today. Take care.